Fantastic. Thanks, Lucy. Lovely to see some people I know on here. So great. Thank you for joining. And just say, for those who don't know me, I'm Matt Stevens, co-founder of Impulse. About 6 years ago, I wrote a book called The Engagement Revolution, which was really it was my bet that the future engagement was going to be around focusing on how people feel and why, alongside all the other key factors we know, line manager, inclusion, etc. But there was a key bet that the revolution is about focusing on how your people feel, why, which is critical, and that we could really unlock approaches to engagement. So that's a little bit about me. I'm thrilled to have today with us, right off his sick bed, Kevin Green, the Chief People Officer at First Bus. I've set you up well there, Kevin. It's great to have you with us.
I'm looking forward to it. I came back from holiday last week and have picked up COVID. So I felt very unwell on Tuesday, but feeling certainly better today than I was then.
Well,
but I might be a bit croaky.
Yeah, we're very grateful you made the effort. So thank you. And also a published author with competitive people strategy. And to be fair, I mean, if you don't know anything about Kevin, I would say he's regularly asked to be on the sort of speaker circuit within the people HR world because of what he's done, what he's doing. And hopefully today, as we get towards the end, you'll think, wow, yeah, you can really see why Kevin's in demand, because what's happening at First Bus really is a bit of a revolution. And we're thrilled to just be on the coattails and be sort of supporting what's going on there. So without further ado, just to say, we're going to try and come into land about 10 to. That's so that you get a little bit of time back. Sometimes we'll just take that last 5 minutes. Just Lucy will have a few messages for you, a few updates of what's going on. But we'll aim for about 10 to. So stick with us. We're going to sort of be ending with Kevin giving us his views on what he thinks is some good resources for you to tap into, any good book or podcast he's listened to. I'm sure at the end he'll share that. We're going to be looking at some really big themes around the transport sector. So I know even if you're not from that sector, I think there's enough data that could be really interesting to you, and some of the challenges they face, that not just, some of them are very unique to them and some of them cross sectors. We're going to be getting into understanding the strongest emotions that are being driving the transport sector and within First Bus too. And also we're going to really look at, so what's Kevin done? What's he done to improve engagement once we get to that point too? So, and then finally, of course, we're going to be looking at how actually the last year, probably 15 months, we've been focused on if you like, supercharging engagement by focusing on 360 leadership, and we'll share some of the work we've been doing there too. So without further ado, I'm going to get straight into it. So I think it's fair to say, Kevin, and by the way, please do ask questions as we go, everyone who's on. I think it's fair to say it's a pretty challenging and changing sector. And I'd love you just to speak for a couple of minutes, if it's all right. Give everyone the picture. What are you facing? What are the challenges and the upstream and downstream stuff?
So I think there's lots of challenges, like in most organisations. The world around us is shifting. So the big themes, I suppose, would be, the first one would be about public transport being, incredibly important and central to our shift to a much more sustainable, low carbon economy and society. So getting people out of cars or onto public transport is a huge political agenda, and bus and rail have a huge part to play in that. Now, one of the things that we've been doing at First Bus, we're leading the way on decarbonisation, 15%. I think we've got 650 and another 200 on order. So nearly 1,000 of our buses will be electric soon, of our sort of 6,500 fleet. So, but we've committed to getting there by 2035. Now, that sounds quite simple, doesn't it? But in reality, what that means is you've got to put infrastructure into every depot, and you've got to buy new buses. And new buses are twice the price of a diesel bus. So, we are spending 100 million a year, and the business made that amount of money last year. So as a group perspective, we are investing ahead of that cycle. It's hugely important for us that we decarbonise our fleet, and that we really shift and encourage people to use the bus. So that's a big sort of macro trend. Secondly, I suppose there's the whole franchising of bus, and governments being much more interested. So there's been, Boris was a big lover of bus. The Tories have been very active in the £2 fare and subsidising during COVID. And now what we have is Labour mayors looking at franchising. So At the moment, about 48% of the market is franchised. We think within 5 years, 78%. So there's a huge process of looking at how does the private sector work hand in hand with mayors, often Labour mayors, to be able to provide services to local communities. And that's meaning change for us. You know, there's different models. Andy Burnham is who owns the depots, who owns the buses, you know, how do the contracts work? So everyone's doing it a slightly different way, but a huge shift. So that's a huge shift.
Yeah.
And then I suppose there's, from an organizational perspective, and I'll talk about one people thing in a moment, but from an organizational perspective, there's about becoming less doing it the way we've always done it. So much more of a growth in demand responsive transport. We're doing some pilots with coaches, supporting airport businesses. We're doing more B2B work. We're doing a lot of work with the biggest distributor, you know, online distributor. You know who that is. It begins with A. We provide a lot of services to them in terms of their workforce. And we did Silverstone last weekend, Glastonbury the week before. So lots of different things. So lots of growth opportunities. So we see ourselves as a growth business, but having to adapt to a very radical changing market. In relation to people, the thing I would say is I think us, along with other transport businesses, treated our people as a cost and a commodity. That's how they were perceived. They were operationally focused business. We've been working in the last few years to reposition ourselves as a service business, which is a huge cultural and mindset shift. And just to give you, you know, we had the great resignation post-COVID where we had turnover, you know, bus drivers at 42%. It cost us £8,500 to train a bus driver from beginning to end. You know, that was a £30 million hit to the bottom line. And I've given you an idea of what sort of profit we make. So, you know, we have to change the cultural environment, pay people more, and make it a great place to work. So the imperative to deal with the amount of external changes, you need to be able to get your organization match fit and ready for that amount of organizational, you know, environmental change. And that's what we've been doing.
Yeah, it's very interesting listening, Kevin. Just thinking for everyone listening, everyone has most companies have an ESG agenda, but yours is really, really actually impactful and very earthy in what's expected. Not that others aren't, but you do tend to see sometimes a bit performative in some organisations, whereas for you have to decarbonise.
Yeah, and we do, Matt. And one of the other things is it throws up opportunity. So we're now an energy provider. We're selling electricity to DPD and DHL, and we're now doing it to the consumer in the Southwest. And you're going, well, hang on a second, we're a bus company. So, you know, it enables us to innovate and create growth opportunities.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you're right, this is real. This isn't a conceptual thing. This is right at the centre of what we do.
Yeah. And listen, you know, with all of that going on and the huge, as you say, franchising. So in other words, it's not necessarily seen as it's the, you know, the first bus branding with the whole environmental what you've got to achieve there. And then, as you say, a real change. And for everyone listening, just thinking about that of, you know, imagine basically people have been a cost and commodity to now actually you're the most important thing in this business because it's a service business. So with that in mind, I think it's worth just sharing for everyone what's the impact that's had on the engagement index. And for us, we work with well over 100 companies across lots of different sectors. You can see here that within the transport sector, of which we have a huge amount of companies, actually, the engagement index of 2024 so far is 69%. And that's minus 5 percentage points versus all our clients. So you see quite significantly down compared to all clients. You can see, like everybody, 2021, there was a bump because of COVID. Then it dropped back down, stayed quite even, and now it's going back up, which, again, we're seeing across, to be fair, all sectors, it's moving up again. But if you compare that to the all clients, it's quite a significantly less. And then, as you know, we focus on emotions and we ask people how they're feeling, give them a range of emotions. And here, again, you see even bigger drops. So for transport, it's 58, which is 8 percentage points lower than all our clients. Again, so in other words, it's fair to say that challenging sector is impacting real world how people feel about working in not just obviously your organization, but across the sector. And if I just move on, we wanted to show everyone as well a little bit of the kind of emotions. These are most dominant emotions over the last few years. Again, really interesting to see in 2024 that committed has remained the same, but it has dropped, which is interesting because that would suggest that you know, people are not as committed as they were. We've seen happy rise up, which is great, and we'll come on to that, particularly with First Bus and what you've been doing then. Brilliant to see proud now making it into those top three. These are the top three emotions across the transport sector. Then if we look at the negative emotions, we see that unappreciated, interesting, is the most dominant negative emotion within the transport sector, with stressed and disconnected. And for those of you wondering, we have this for a myriad of sectors, so jump on board, because it's very, very interesting when you start getting into the actual emotions. Great to have the engagement index, great to have all that sort of side too, but actually when you start to see the dominant emotions across sectors and companies, it really does change the conversation. So just briefly, I'm going to just talk around, so why are we seeing those high levels of positive emotions within the transport sector? And then we're going to get on to specifics of Kevin and First Bus. Well, being honest, we find that the positive emotions are being driven at this local level. People definitely enjoying their job, committed to doing their best, to the best of their ability, very much relationships with their colleagues. So in other words, commitment to the team, commitment to the role. It is less about organizational strategy and vision. There's no doubt about that. But it's more about that feeling cared for and listened. As we said, within the transport sector, personal commitment and job satisfaction are very notably dominant themes, and actually more so than commitment to the organisation, which is interesting. So in other words, people are saying, look, I'm kind of the person who would always commit and give my best, rather than saying I'm really committed to this organisation, which will come on to some of the attrition levels, Kevin, that you've been dealing with. And then just finally, there's no doubt we see that some of these positive reasons, committed, happy and proud, are to do with people loving their job and they find their work very interesting. Let's just switch and look at, so why do people feel unappreciated? The most dominant reason, well, actually, and this is fascinating, it's all to do with the human skills of local managers. Lack of communication, the support, the recognition. And then there's definitely a feeling of being unpaid, not receiving a pay rise. How do we get this? We get from all the data where we ask people how they're feeling, then we say why. We have an algorithm that reads all of those free text responses and puts them into different themes. And these are the strongest themes that have emerged about lack of communication, support, feedback, recognition. And there's no doubt, and you alluded to it a moment ago, Kevin, that this problem with line managers, they're the squeezed middle, and it's very easy for them to become disengaged themselves. They're getting it from above, and the people are saying, why aren't you doing this? And get out these messages and make sure everyone's on board. And are you doing this? And are you doing that? And they also get it from those following them, who are saying, why aren't you protecting us? Why aren't you looking after us? Why are you letting those so-and-sos change everything? Why is there constant different things that we have to do? So I think it's also fair to say, particularly within the transport sector, although this can be across lots of sectors, managers do tend to be promoted based on operational skills. And there's an absolute need, and this is where we'll come into the 360 and the work we did with leaders, or doing with leaders on that, around coaching and development around the human skills. So just around this next one around stress and disconnected, well, this is actually to do feedback about senior leaders, highlighting issues around one-way and two-way communication, feeling that leaders aren't explaining the changes and things that are happening, and sometimes that leads to high levels of disconnection. And then I think it's fair to say that there's a feeling that sometimes senior leaders don't understand the issues people are facing in their roles, or they'll have confidence they'll be listened to. And so you think of frontline colleagues, drivers, conductors, etc. They tend to be the most negative about senior leadership, probably partly in fact because they're most removed, as you'd expect, but again, really fascinating to be able to see why they're feeling this stress and this disconnection as the highest levels of emotion. So just to wrap this sort of transport sector up, and then we're going to dive right into the First Bus story. Again, I just thought it'd be useful for everyone to sort of see where's the biggest differences between the transport sector and all other sectors. And here you can see couple are absolutely to do with line manager, which has really clearly come out already from the emotions about I receive regular feedback. That's really reinforcing and correlating this, how they're feeling and the reason why, and then also being recognized for doing a good job. Then you get the sort of well-being thing around you achieving a work-life balance. You get the whole learning and development around opportunity to learn and grow. And then these two, which we talked about, disconnection and stress, is coming from not feeling well informed. And as Kevin put up just a moment ago, my goodness, there's so much to inform them of, and everything's changing very rapidly and quickly. And also senior leaders not necessarily understanding the issues we face in our jobs. So that's just a whirlwind tour. Hopefully you found that useful to kind of give you an insight into what's going on in the transport sector. So I guess what we want to do now is let's just chunk down a little bit and get into first bus, if that's all right. So let's just bring us back. We've been working together 2-3 years now, but we thought we'd just go to 2023 rather than go back any further for this. And we wanted to talk. And I'd love to hear from you, Kevin, but you made some big, bold decisions to really change your whole listening and engagement approach. And if I can be so bold as say, I think you were really clear that you bought into sort of the Impulse approach of focusing on how people feel, and the idea of actually putting the line manager front and center of the engagement conversation and how they take action, alongside probably less questions and listening a little bit more regularly. So rather than me talk for you, Kevin, it'd be great for everyone to hear. So how have you revolutionized? Because you really did. You went from a sort of annual survey to 3-4 surveys a year. Talk to us a bit about that.
So I mean, so I think so the context is we've got a disillusioned workforce in some parts of our work. Our environment, I'd call the culture toxic. We've got lots of trade union activity, 73 bargaining units, different 3Ts and 3, so lots of complexity, lots of, an adversarial relationship with trade unions. So, and at the heart of it, our managers very disengaged from talking to our workforce. So the starting point was in 22 was to start doing 4 surveys a year of the whole workforce. Huge commitment. We've now downgraded that to 3 surveys a year. But the reason for that is that what I didn't want to get into big set pieces where it's all about participation and then we have an action plan and it goes on forever. This was very much around creating a much more organic process where we give data to managers and then start to reinforce their role. So what we want them to do. So we now do a survey 3 times a year. And the data is then shared with frontline managers. But alongside that, there are things that we have done sort of divisionally to support this thing. One is that we've undertaken a change program bottom up called People Centricity, which is design thinking, where we basically went out and got great ideas from frontline drivers, engineers and managers, codified that into 300 different interventions. We then prioritized that to 27. We then piloted those 27 across 3 or 4 depots, found the 14 things that really made a real impact. And now we've been rolling that out depot by depot. 18-month program, not top-down change, bottom up. Their ideas, their views, codified, and that has involved, music on buses and how we clean our buses and uniform changes. But the point is, what we're going is, you said, we did. We're playing that back, which alongside what I'm going to talk about with catch-ups and the engagement survey demonstrates which we're really listening. And not only are we listening, we're taking action. So the second thing that we did quite early in the process, and our first engagement score was 44, and it then went down to 41. So we really did have a low starting place. Was we introduced something called a catch-up. So we've run 7 rounds of this now, and this is why did we introduce catch-ups? A frontline conversation, 20 minutes between frontline manager and supervisor and driver and engineer. Why did we do that? We had an appraisal process. It was a 14-page process. It would have taken me weeks, well, not weeks, but a lot of time to do it. And it was all about attendance and discipline and collisions and safety management and drive green. So it was quite punitive. It was very much a view that we know best. You've just got to do what we say. And if you don't, we're going to punish you. So culturally, you could see the shift. So scrap that, replace it with a human conversation, frontline managers, give them some training, give them some skills, give them some prompts, but just get them to do it. We do it voluntary. We started with about 50%. We're now up to 80-90% of people getting these conversations 3 times a year. And that's been one of the drivers of moving our engagement survey. But the second thing is, we learned that things like free tea and coffee, we give that to managers and leaders across the organisation behind doors in depots, but frontline staff had to pay for that. So we just changed the rules. Everyone gets free tea and coffee. We had to do big physical improvements in our depots because they were, sometimes quite horrible places physically to work. So I've had to do
Yeah.
27 toilet refurbishments, you know. So,
Yeah.
so if you think about it from an employee experience, environment,
Yeah.
manager,
Yeah.
listening,
Yeah.
taking action, but also communicating, you know, much more. We use an app to communicate with our drivers. We've
Yeah.
made that much more two-way. We've done a lot of stuff about how we bring
Yeah.
them together locally. So a lot of activity, but all of it based on listening to what frontline people are
Yeah.
telling us, taking action and playing it back, and they're coming on the journey. What's that meant? Big macro, halved attrition, absence radically reduced, and obviously, you know, that's led through to things like, you know, lost mileage. We're running more buses more frequently, more customers, more money. So we can demonstrate the business case
Yes.
back to the organization.
So Kevin, you said a lot there, and I really want everyone listening, both live and then later on, not to miss that, because there's some very practical, earthy things. But I want to start with what actually is quite a revolutionary thing, and I know some of those who signed up for this will kind of look at this and go, really? Can you do that? Can you go from a once a year to a 4 times a year? And Kevin, if I think back, you know, we even counselled you and said, look, you could break the system here. And you said, I want to break the system. That's the whole point. We've got to completely implode this. And obviously the technology was good enough. We got the real time, you got the PowerPoint downloads instantly, you got managers having access to their own data, but you still had to go and break that system. And for everyone listening, I'd really encourage you. I know sometimes exec get nervous, and sometimes it's is this really possible, and can we really do this? And I would say to you, well, we've seen with first person, it really is possible. And I think we've come to the most helpful place, which is probably about 3 times a year. I would have, you know, that's probably where we thought we'd end up. But I would say don't miss that you took the decision. It is possible to move from a once a year to more of a regular listening, but it requires you to be willing to ask less questions, to be okay with things being a bit messy for a bit. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, there was a bit of convincing the exec and then convincing our leadership population this was the right thing to do. But once we got going, then
Yes.
it was to try and make it organic. You know what happens is traditionally there's an engagement survey, and then HR they look at the data, and everyone goes over and develops a business, you know, an action plan, and then not a lot happens really, if I'm being honest, in lots of organisations, because the action plan's too complex. And what we've been saying is, what's the one thing you're going to do?
Yeah.
Right. And there is noise still about doing it 3 times a year. You know, we do go out to the whole workforce. We have simplified the questions and abridged them. And at some point I might go down to 2, but that's most probably once I think I'm in, you know, upper quartile performance. I might then go, okay, now it's incremental. But there was so much to do. It was like, here's the feedback. You're the managers and leaders. Just tell us the one thing you're going to do. So we didn't put a big action planning process. We just said what you're going to do and then comms it. So go out and tell everybody why you've done it, what your feedback was, and also the things that they've suggested you can do that you can't. So it was trying to turn it into something that was just owned and driven much more by frontline managers.
Yeah, no, I really like that. And also don't want people to miss the very practical steps you took from the data you were getting. The insight was giving you was, actually, we do need to listen to people more. We need to change the catch-ups. We need to have a similar experience, because actually the experience people are having is very different. So, for example, the tea and coffee, as you mentioned. So let's look at there's a lot in there that you said. Really appreciate it. I hope everyone's, you know, enjoying the honesty and transparency. And here coming next, Kevin's actually agreed. So you're getting it live or a little bit later. Actually agreed to share the actual hard numbers with you. So, you know, applause and kudos to Kevin do this. A lot of clients will come on a webinar and they say, "Well, I'd rather not show my data." So let's actually show people, if I can do that, what actually this looks like in reality. So what's actually happened. So you can see here from when you started working with Inpulse, in terms of the engagement index was 44. So, you know, very lower quartile, no doubt. And here it is, February, and actually we're just in the middle of one now, almost at the end, or at the end. We're at 60%, and there's one about just happened. So absolutely an unbelievable increase over that 18-month to 2 years, 2-year period. If we look at the positive emotions, gone from 36 up to 57, which is quite normal. We see that tracking is quite correlated to the engagement index. And also, if we look at response rate, which is just phenomenal. Remember, people are being asked this 3 to 4 times a year. It's gone from 31 to 67%. So just pause, right? Who am I to say this, Kevin? But, you know, candidly, well done. These are absolutely fantastic set of results. couple of questions I got for you. One is, it's not a straight line. So there's a story behind these ups and downs and lefts and rights. Anything you want to say about that?
And there always will be, won't there? Because if you're measuring that more regularly, you're going to be influenced by what's going on in the business at the time. And we have little skirmishes with trade unions and industrial action and pay disputes, and we've closed the business, we've sold a business, we've bought businesses. All of that will have an impact. Yeah. But the other thing I think is worth saying is, look at what happened in the first year. It didn't really move.
Yeah.
Three surveys, a year of doing this 3 times, and it wasn't moving. It was only in the second year it started to shift. Yes. And then we've started to, and then we plateaued, and then we've moved again, and we're plateaued. So I think it's not going to be a linear straight line, right? Yeah. It is, you're going to have, and also we know partly the context, what's going on within the business, but we also know what we're deploying, what change we're trying to drive, and what impact that will have. So I think there's a number of things in there that I would say. One is, recognize it's not going to be a straight line, recognize it will plateau, and it might even go backwards. We went from we had a 57 back to a 55 before we went back up to 60. People go, well, what's all that about? And you've got to look at some of this. So you've got to use the verbatims as well to really understand what people are saying. And you can start to get, one of the things I'd spend a lot of time personally is really digging into the data and looking at what people are saying so that you get some kind of understanding. Yeah. And that's what we're encouraging our leadership teams and our managers to do, is to understand what your people are saying to you so that you can respond. And there are things that have been easy to respond to, and things that we're finding much more difficult. But that means, we've been working on a modernization of our shift and rosters, and we're piloting in that 3 or 4 depots, and we will roll that out. That will give us a huge, because that's the number one issue for our people, we know, as well as managers' capability. They're just how we're asking them to work and how it's having an impact on their well-being and their personal life is, we know that's a driver of attrition. So we really are going to get at that. It's not easy in a bus business because it's 24/7 and how we run timetables, but we are, and that's a 2-year process of trying to get underneath it, piloting, learning, and going again.
Yeah, no, I really like that, Kevin. Just a couple of quick ads for everyone again listening. I think just to sum that up, I think we would absolutely agree, and we've always said to you when we started working with you, is take a 3-year view. And I do remember that first year very well, and the phone calls we had, and you were like, what's, and to be fair to you, you held steady. And I think it's probably some more of your exec who are getting worried. And you're like, no, let's keep doing the things we're doing because we know they are the solutions people are looking for. They just haven't fed through to the results yet. And that willingness to take that sort of 3-year view, honestly, it's like anything. If you're willing to take a slightly longer view, you can build something really fantastic. If you're always looking for a result within a month or a week or even a year, sometimes you miss out. I think the second thing to say is our data science people always say it's the trend data. So don't take the in moment, and as you say, it's actually the trend. And so there's absolutely that was just no question here. All the trends are going in the right direction, and significantly. Last question just for you, Kevin. I'm really interested. The response rate, what do you think that's about? Because that's an amazing achievement.
Yeah, I mean, the response rate, I think, is some people in our business get very obsessed about the response rate, and I think it's that important. I think it was voluntary. We encourage people. I think there is a bit about we bonus this. So we have put this as one of our, apart from business performance and personal performance, there's 3 metrics. So people, customer, and environment that we metric. And we use people engagement as the core metric. So it has an impact on managers' pay, once a year, whether we hit the number or not. So I think that encourages people to focus on it. It shows we're serious about it. It shows we're looking at a balanced approach to managing and leading the organization and our people. But I think it does encourage, the one where towards the end of the year, people to make sure we get as much participation as possible. Yeah. So, I think we're going to be back at 51, 52 this time, the one we've just done, which is still our second highest. So there's no worry. Anything, I think you said to me at the beginning, anything above 20% is statistically valid. So, when you're doing it 3 times a year, don't focus on the participation, focus on the data, focus on the data and the verbatims. But bonusing, I think, is important. And using it as a lead indicator on the people strategy.
Absolutely. And what this has also absolutely shown is, because you can overlay it as you already have, the things you've done, the actions you've taken, that then you can see. But what's been so interesting, as you say, is there's a lag. And I think, again, that I really want everyone listening to understand that sometimes senior leaders think, well, we did that, we said that, why hasn't there been a bounce immediately? Well, it's a bit of a lag, typically 6 to 12 months. And I think just the other thing to say on response rates for everyone listening, we would always say if you're doing it once a year, you should be about 70% plus. If you're doing it 2 to 3 times a year, you're normally between 40 and 60. And if you're doing it 4 times plus, anything over 20% is more than statistically significant, and it can be absolutely taken as valid of an understanding of how the organization is feeling. That's from our data science team. But let's move on, because now there's a lot on this slide, Kevin, but I'm going to let you speak to it.
And I'm not going to, I mean, this is a slide I could speak about. So for me, this is showing our people strategy and its impact on organizational performance. So 8 or 9 projects at the bottom that we were driving on from a people perspective, the type of people outcomes that we were hoping we would see. If we get those people outcomes, what business results will that drive? If we get those business results, how does that help us achieve our strategic imperatives and our business case? So for me, I'm a great believer in this. This comes from the whole balanced scorecard, Kaplan and Norton stuff. It's all about how do you do a strategy map? How do you articulate the soft stuff, and how you're going to use the soft stuff to improve organization? We've doubled our profits. We have a really successful business. Our NPS is going up. Why is it? Has it anything to do with our engagement and how we're treating our people? Absolutely. Of course it has. But you have to prove it, and you need to use something like this, a strategy map with a scorecard, to demonstrate over time. And also, we're trying to look at engagement and its impact on attrition and absence, and what is the lag, and how does it follow, and what happens at a local level as well as happening at the level. So this is a hypothesis. We started off with this as a hypothesis, and we've now been measuring it. But this is a 3 to 5 year journey. Okay, so that's that slide. If you go to the next one, and I'll whiz on that, and then you might want to talk. So what we then do is we turn that into, what's the plan, Kevin? That's your strategy, your hypothesis. We've got, these are the 6 things we're focusing on. If you go to the next slide, we then got an objective and KPIs under each of those 6 themes. So every quarter, what we're doing is measured and we report against it. So this is motivated and engaged teams. That's one of the pillars. This is, I can't remember, this is 24. This is period 4, the end of the year. These were the things that we were going to do. This is how we're tracking against it. And last year, we were very ambitious. We did 78% of all the activity to time and to budget. So I've got a hypothesis. If we do these things, we'll get those results. But you've also got to measure the doing and the activity to make sure you do it, and you do it consistently. So what I'm saying is it's a system. This is the thing I always talk about with people, is it's a system that's integrated within other systems. But you've got to have a hypothesis, you've got to manage the activity, and then measure the outcomes and the outputs from it.
Yeah, no, I love that. And just for everyone listening, we've got about 15 minutes left, and then we're going to be bringing into land. But wow, what a powerful few slides. And again, thank you for sharing these with us. I think the other thing that for me, I always say to people is really important, particularly when we're going through the sort of sales processes, look, we want to tap into your people strategy, which should be aligned to your business strategy. And so, that for us is an absolute dream, as opposed, and being honest with you, Kevin, where sometimes there is no people strategy, or it's very, very loose. It's sort of back of a fag packet, as they say. And we're sort of having to navigate. Almost they start to use the engagement strategy as almost the people strategy. We're like, no, this is a part within it. We understand that. We're not trying to be the be all and end all. But look, that was very, very useful. And is there anything you want to say?
And it is a system. So, we have improved pay, we have improved facilities, we are doing stuff around uniforms, we're doing stuff around our brand. So, engagement activity doesn't sit in isolation. It's how it all fits together that gives you the impact and the outcomes.
Yes. And you also said something really important. I just want to pick up for everyone is we've been working with you on, and continue to work with you on, actually correlating some of those key business metrics, like, as you said, you've halved attrition over these last few years, like you've reduced sickness alongside the engagement, because that's the holy grail, as we all know, that if we can absolutely show there's a causation, which is still not quite within our grasp, but we can absolutely show strong correlations between a rising employee engagement, a rising improvement in positive emotions, and a reduction in both attrition and sickness. So yeah, appreciated you sharing that. So look, let's just shift focus. We're going to do probably two final things. One is I just want to look at some of these emotions and get into that, because that's one of the things that makes Impulse unique. And you have actually chosen to focus on how people feel and the reason why, and then start to try and solve some of those issues. In fact, that's some of where the sort of key insight has come from. And then we'll move into 360 and what we've been doing there for the final 10 minutes. But again, I just thought it'd be really interesting for everyone to see this amazing journey you've been on of, happiness being back in 22, 18%, and it's now 35% within the organization. Really, really fantastic to see. And people being happy mainly because of their job and the people they work with, but very importantly, feeling part of a supportive and friendly team. And then just on Committed, what you've done really, really well is keep that very constant, which is great, because go back to the beginning and you have this huge challenges within the sector. You have all of this change going on, all the things you're trying to do internally, and actually remain very positive. Anything you want to say on those positive emotions?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're pleased with our progress, particularly with happy. I mean, I will go on to the other side and go, the bit that delights me is the bit about unappreciated, because for me that was such a strong negative emotion where, and myself and Jeanette, who's our MD, we do quarterly frontline manager calls with the whole population. So we do 6 or 7 calls over a 2 or 3 day period. And a lot of our frontline managers were going, I never speak to anyone that's doing a good job, because I'm tied into writing reports and doing stuff. And I've got a big queue of people for disciplines outside my door. And there was a big queue of people outside. So that's quite a big change. So I've created a new shared service and put in a people advisory service to support line managers. We took away some activity. We did some hard mechanistic changing their work to give them the time so that they could go out and speak. And that catch-up process that I talked about has been absolutely fundamental. And that's why we've halved unappreciated, because we're now talking to people. We're saying, thank you, well done. You're doing a great job. And that creates happiness, doesn't it? So those two things, I think, are working in combination. Stressed is that more difficult one, because a lot of that's to do with workload. And we know that when you're running an organization which is dealing with lots of change, so think about our central functions for a moment. We've got multiple projects where we're trying to improve things, and that infrastructure and that decarbonisation and new buses and franchising and all of that. So they're having to do a lot of things, and we're not growing the workforce, so people are having to do more and be more productive, but we've reduced stress at the same time. So we are listening and being supportive. And that's important. And obviously at the front line, we're looking at that core roster and how we structure how people work within the organization, because we think we can reduce that significantly from there.
How important, Kevin, do you think it's been for you in these last couple of years to focus as much on how people are feeling and why as the sort of more left brain engagement index and the other question?
Well, I think it's about management for me. It's about the conversation. So the issue I think we have is what people often do when you do engagement surveys. They go, right, people have said it's something about pay. Right, HR, go away and sort out some kind of new pay system. And it gets quite top down, mechanistic. And for me, this is, and if you looked at our data, and we thought this was our hypothesis at the beginning, we're just not treating people very well.
I remember,
and so what we used is the emotional stuff to say people are feeling unappreciated. What is that? Are you saying hello to them every morning in our depots? Does it feel like people are being supported? Are you doing the catch-up conversations? Are people coming up with ideas? We're just about to introduce huddles. And the reason for introducing huddles is because, improving our comms process. We've improved our app, so it's two-way. So all of this is about listening to people, and listening and taking action means that you can then play that back. You said this, we're trying to do these things. We're trying to respond to what you're saying. So it shows that it's an adult to adult conversation. But to get into that, I needed to use emotions, because otherwise my managers are all left brain. They wanted plans and hard things. Change the reward mechanism. The appraisal form's not working. We need to do, no. Let's get to the human bit.
It's simpler than that. Yeah, it's actually simpler than that. So look, with just about less than 10 minutes left, just two other bits. I really think it's useful for people to also see. If you remember at the beginning, I showed you the worst scores for the sector compared to all other sectors. And I just thought it was really awesome that actually, if you look over the last few years, those questions have been some of your biggest, these are some of the biggest rises in terms of supervisor manager cares about me from 43 to 61. So a 50% increase there almost. Feeling supportive, a supportive community team, 45 to 63. I've now got opportunities. Remember, that was one of the issues in the transport sector. So you really have been dealing, and fair to you, because we obviously give you that data. We say, look, here's what's going on in the transport sector. And you've chosen to focus on some of those core questions. If I do a great job, I know I'm going to be recognized. Again, from 28 to 48. These are massive, massive increases that you've seen. So again, just I think to recognize you've gone after some of these. I agree with you, and I think obviously because we're working together, partnering, that we would say the line manager needs to get into conversations and need to get to more human conversation around what's going on, and the exec need to do the one or two things each year that I know you've spent. So you've had to work hard with your exec to get them to just focus on these one or two things that have really shown great success because of that.
Yeah, it is about it's about. Our job is to remove the sort of hygiene things, the things that aren't working. So the facilities, the performance appraisal or conversation tool, the comms process, that's down to us as a people function to improve. We can do that. But at the core part, though, is how do we get line managers to do what we want them to do, or think what they should be doing? And that's about communication. It's about training, development. We've done a lot of training of frontline managers. We're just doing a big talent mapping exercise to see what our bench strength is. There'll be another development program, and the 360 that you've been helping us with is all part of that. We know that frontline managers are critical in this, and about how they behave every day in our depots is what drives this stuff. And we can see that the impact it has on all the hard metrics as well. So yeah, it is about not trying to do too much. What's the one thing you're going to do locally? Here are the two or three things we're working on divisionally.
Yeah, perfect. So in the last 5 minutes, thanks for staying with us, everyone. We're going to just have a 5-minute conversation about 360. So I really understand the impact and importance it's going to have. So where this came from is that our data science team came to us a couple of years ago and went, Matt, you won't believe it. We're finding unbelievable correlations between how people answer questions about how they're being led and their levels of engagement and happiness. And I was like, well, excuse my bad language, no shit, Sherlock, right? We kind of know that, but they got really excited because they were like, but we've actually got the data. It's just so overwhelmingly obvious. So we were like, what do we do? How do we help this? And our answer was actually what we need to do is start to measure the leadership side a little bit more regularly, which number one, first requires the leaders to understand what's being asked of them. 2, to then have some form of measurement, and 3, have that coaching and support. So that's what we developed over 18 months ago, and now working with a range of clients and particularly First Bus on that. And what that gave, I think, to you, and it'd be good to hear your views on this, was one, we actually run a sort of, if you like, mindset workshop around really getting the managers. So we're rolling up our sleeves, our consultancy team, our coaching team go out there, and they roll up the sleeves, and they're dealing with the managers who've been at the often they've come up through the ranks, they've become managers, and they find it very difficult to have the hard conversations. And unfortunately, most of now being in the workplace as a manager is having hard and honest conversations about change that are going on, about how you need to do things differently, as well as obviously the recognition side. But I think so. So there was that sort of coaching piece that then leads into helping them prepare them to understand 360 is a developmental, not performance. And the reason we can't show any data is obviously it's all personal. It's got everyone's sort of league tables and where they are and everything. So we've chosen not to show any of that data. But again, what's been amazing is we can correlate how they're doing on their line managers 360 scores against their engagement scores. And Kevin, I was just having a dive into this yesterday and seeing there's some really fascinating data starting to emerge around those pockets that you would expect where people with typically the lower engagement scores are getting lower 360 scores, and fascinating to sort of see that correlation already emerging. But I'd love to just in a couple of 2-3 minutes just share what made you go with the 360 alongside engagement, and how's it been for you?
I mean, for me, it's about I think as a sector, and I think at first we'd underinvested in our frontline managers. We've never really done comprehensive training programs, and we did a as part of people centricity with a 3-day sort of operational leadership program. But I wanted to get them to think about themselves. I think, to be a great leader, you have to look at yourself first. And so a 360 is a very powerful tool. And a lot of our frontline managers will have never done this. And there was some fear about it, but it was to do it in a very safe way. Yep. We allowed them, we weren't very prescriptive. We allowed quite an informal process. Yep. This is all about supporting you, giving you some insight, giving you some value, and you do something with it. But it was about, again, treating them as adults, giving them some information, taking them through a process, making them feel secure, giving them some data. And then over time, we are obviously going to have to harden the conversation because, we're investing a lot in our frontline managers. And, I think there's always a third are brilliant and just going to fly. A third, it's all about development and take people with you. And a third are really going to struggle. And why we want to give everybody a chance, we're most probably now going to be in the process of, we're going to have to give you more support and more help and whatever, because what we can't do is move at the speed of the slowest. We really do need to think about how do we accelerate our people transformation. So for me, it's all about frontline managers. And so this has been a key part of giving people the feedback. Someone said to me a while ago on my exec, feedback is the breakfast of champions. And for me, I think that's true. How do you expect line managers to improve? We haven't got a great, management cascade of giving people feedback and brilliant, robust sort of development. So this was a really powerful intervention to get us moving and to start the process.
Yeah. And just as we come into land, I want to be very honest with people. The journey that we or the pathway we've been on with First Bus and Kevin is this is the dream for us, where a client comes along and says, look, we recognize we need to evolve, grow, change. We're not all going to do it in 6 months. It's going to take 3-4 years, but we're committed to that. And I guess then seeing the impact that focusing on emotion can have, seeing about giving line managers and making them the front and center of engagement, adding in the 360 to enhance that engagement process. It's been a joy to watch sort of the impact it's had on the organization. And then, thankfully, it's been a dream outcome, which is, attrition has dropped significantly, sickness has gone down, profitability's back up. And whilst I can't take all the credit, Kevin, I'll leave that to you and your leaders and the line managers. I would say it's been a pleasure to be part of that journey, and that's what we're in this for with clients. So I'd love to know, just as Lucy joins us in a moment, is what would you say to anyone in closing? Anything about firstly Impulse, but also any advice on any good book you've read, any podcast, anything you think, I'd love you to go and have a look at this as a HR leader.
Oh, there's lots of things, but I read quite avidly. And when I was writing my book, I spent 6 or 7 months doing quite a lot of what they call deep research, don't they? But that means reading everything you can get your hands on.
Basically, yeah.
So let me come to that in a moment. I think that my advice would be, first of all, you've been a really good partner to work with. The tool's great. I think the emotions is hugely important. And I like that you give us data and you hold up the mirror and you give us some comparative data. So you've been a great partner to work with. But it's not about you. It's not about me. It's not about my team. It's about frontline managers and giving them the tools to do the job. And that's the exciting bit for me, because we're doing it for real. I think, but I do think your point about this is a long journey. You don't get there quickly. It is 3 to 5 years, and I think more on the 5 than the 3. And secondly, I suppose, you've got to sort out your HR function, and you've also got to have a really great relationship with the leaders within the business. And that's been a journey as well. It hasn't always been easy. There's lots of our managers that have been part of bus companies go, what? You're going to measure the people stuff? Well, I'm going to get bonused on that, but I just get the buses out. Well, who drives the buses? Who fixes the buses? Who deals with the customer? Oh yeah. Well, okay, I see what you mean. So we're having to have all of those conversations, from a strategic conversation right the way down to a supervisor in a depot. So it's not easy and it takes time. But the power of what we're trying to do, which is to treat people more effectively, treat them as human beings and adults, train our managers, develop them so that they can deliver that. And you're going to get the benefits. And it's a long, hard slog, but boy, does it, when you start to get the traction,
Feels
it's
good.
great. And of course, and then, everyone else claims the credit, don't they? Well, my engagement of my depot is brilliant. Look at what my leaders and managers are doing. And you just have to stand there in the background clapping, going, well done, guys,
Yeah, love that. Love that. I'm gonna just ask you, is there any book you think that you'd recommend? Anything, any podcast, anything you think is worth a little listen?
The podcast, I mean, I listen to the High Performance podcast. I listen to Elizabeth Day's one around failure, I reckon is brilliant. The thing I would say in our business, I've been working, bus companies it's old fashioned. You don't make mistakes. We have big investigations. I'm going, no, try stuff, fail, learn, go again. That whole try stuff, learn, so for me, that's been that. We got the high performance guys to come in. We've invested in our leadership development. We spent a lot of money with Lane for EY. And we're running conferences. I had Matthew Syed come and talk to us. I had Elizabeth Day. I had Pippa Grange that worked with the England team as the psychologist that got the mindset right. Come in and talk. They could understand football. They're going, oh, this is great, Kevin. All that stuff you've been talking about isn't a load of rubbish. It works in football as well as in a bus company. So also I would say is there's lots of great, but you've got to find. I mean, I suppose the seminal book for me is most probably Drive by Daniel Pink. I mean, I go back to it time and time again, what motivates people at work, and the longitudinal study he did that showed it was about 3 things. And all of those are, the stuff we've been talking about.
Yeah. Brilliant. Kevin, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate you being on and sharing. Lucy, I'm going to hand back to you.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Kevin. What a great session. And thank you to everyone for staying on till the end. Really appreciate it. We will be sending out the recording on Monday next week. If you do have any other questions that come up for Matt or Kevin, let me know. I'll try and pass those on. And of course, please keep an eye out for our future webinars and have a great rest of the day.
Brilliant. Thanks again, Kevin. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate you being on.